Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Dani. Today we are talking about the last set of books that I read from mid year to the end of 2024. Um, we are already in January of 2025, and I've already started reading some books, so we're off to a good start. I don't ever have a really solid goal for how many books that I want to read in a year. I try to consume as much as I can because it's something that I really enjoy. I am not a booktuber. I'm just sharing the books that I've read and what I've liked and what I might not have liked, and that's what we're doing here today. So I want to say 20, I have 20 books. I think I read a total of 45 this year. I do have my mid-year reads up. I'll try to remember to link it somewhere. But this is what I've read basically from July all the way to December of 2024. The first one I want to start with is Waken Hurst. So this is by Michelle Paver. I loved this book. One of my favorites of the year. My all-time favorite was probably from the mid-year reads, which was, I think, we discussed it on Glitter and Gators, which I'm wearing my little shirt today. But we discussed that on our 2024 favorites. We talked about books and some of our favorite ones. I think mine was probably The Only One Left by Riley Sanger, which I do have two more of their books on this list. But I have to say Waken Hurst was probably my second favorite, if I'm being honest. So this is a gothic tale. This is a ghost story, and we're following Maud. She's like this spunky kid. Her mom was sick and died. She's with her father, who's kind of a jerk. They live next to this kind of, I think they call it a fen. It reminds me of just like a swampy, boggy area in the back of Wake's End, which is their manor house. And things start to go a bit sideways when her father comes across this painting in a churchyard, and it slowly kind of drives him crazy. And as this unfolds, there is this kind of creepy, unsettling thing that, I don't know, just starts to kind of unravel all around him. And she goes through it, but she starts to figure out and unearth some things from the past. And I have to say, like, the whole setting of this book is probably what sold it for me. I love a good, like, gothic style horror, a good unsettling old house, and all the intricacies that go along with it, the people that live in it, and the happenings of everyone around and in the town. And there's so much that kind of unfolds. It was atmospheric, and I absolutely loved this book. Absolutely loved it. I would probably give this one a solid 4, if I had to say, like 4 out of 5 stars for sure. I don't know if I read any 5-star books this year, but I have to say these two are probably the closest. The one that I talked about in the mid-year reads and this one is probably on the top of my list for this year. Next, I read, again, we'll go into the Riley Singers because I read 2 of them back to back here. Survive the Night and Middle of the Night. We have a theme. Survive the Night was captivating because we're following Charlie. She is a college student. There is kind of like this serial killer on the loose, or at least a killer on the loose. Something happened to, I want to say it was her roommate. And ever since then, she's like, I gotta go home. I gotta get out of here. You know? She's got a boyfriend. Um, and she's like telling him, like, oh, I'll probably come back. But I feel like, especially at the beginning, she's pretty much made up her mind that she's not. So she's trying to get home. She finds this. I'm trying to remember. It's been a hot minute. But I want to say she either found this guy on the message board, or she met up with this guy as he was going to put something up on the message board for like a ride share. He was heading out of town. He's got an available ride. He wanted kind of company. And she's looking to get out of town. And so she decides that she is going to take a ride with Josh here. And he's going to bring her home. But on the ride, there's just some things as they're like talking that just don't quite add up. And like as you're following, you're not sure who's crazy, right? Like there are things that are starting to happen and things that she's starting to experience and go through, and like little lies that are being caught that just add incredible tension back and forth, as you start learning a little bit about Josh. And then she basically kind of gets trapped in this space, so it's like a cat and mouse game. um, it was a good story. I often enjoy Riley Sager's books, um, and this was no exception. It was no exception. I like the way that the suspense often unfolds. I wouldn't say it's like things come out of left field. I feel like there's, with the lead up, you can pretty much follow what's happening. It wasn't like uber surprising. Not like, again, I'm gonna go back to The Only One Left. Not like that, which I was just like, how much crazier can this shit get, right? Like, but this one wasn't quite like that, but it was still very captivating. So I would probably say this would be at a solid 3. The next one, The Middle of the Night, is about Ethan and Billy. So Ethan and Billy were kids, and they had a sleepover. They slept in a tent in a backyard at Ethan's house. And when Ethan woke up the next morning, Billy was gone. And this has haunted him for, I want to say it was like, did I write it down? Probably not. 30 years, yeah. 30 years later, Ethan is still kind of dealing with this disappearance of Billy. And I don't remember how he gets back home. I don't really remember that part, but anyway, he kind of goes back, and then there's like these ghostly things that start happening, and he's basically hell-bent on trying to figure out what happened that night and what happened to Billy. And it was a really, really good novel. It really played out well. It kept me engaged the entire time. Is it spectacular? No, but it was a good read. I would probably give this book, I would say about a 3-star, 2.5, 3 stars. Um, Mostly because it wasn't incredibly memorable, but I do remember that I enjoyed the story. I really love how everything unfolded, and it was a classic thriller. Like, no one does twisty-turny thrillers, in my opinion, like Riley does. It's always a good time. Like, I don't think I've ever been disappointed in any book that I've ever read by them, so still a really great book. And then, of course, I always read some oldies but goodies. I don't always, I mean, most of the time I don't think I usually read too many, like, brand new books. Unless I'm watching people on YouTube and watching other booktubers, kind of go through what they're reading or their favorites of the year and stuff. I usually kind of get a list, or I'll go on, TikTok, or I have friends that are like, have you read this? Which is my favorite. So if you ever think that you have a story that I should read, or a book that I should read, please leave it in the comments because I'm gonna check it out. I usually do. But I ended up reading an old Stephen King because he's just my favorite. When I'm in the mood for something like, it's gonna sound weird, but like a cozy read, I usually go for Stephen King because I know how he writes. I know his content, and I'm usually, even when I'm disappointed, I'm really not that disappointed, right? Because I don't know if you're like me, but like I always expect things to go a bit weird. So like when you have that expectation that the ending might be trash, you just enjoy it anyway. But I read Carrie. I have not read Carrie before. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to read it. I'm really glad that I did. I love the way that it was set up because we're reading from, like, if I'm remembering right, like newspaper clippings and interviews and things like that, trying to unfold what happens to Carrie. And if you don't know the story of Carrie, which we have, I think, 2 movies now, um, based on Carrie, which I've seen both. I loved both. Um, Carrie has been bullied by the kids in her class, sometimes by teachers, by her mother. She's really put upon. But the thing that I enjoyed most about reading Carrie is kind of how we got the perspective of how she got to prom with homeboy. What was his name? Was it like Troy or something? I don't know. I don't remember. But that part I found really great. Like it almost felt, you know what the Carrie felt like? Carrie almost felt like an R.L. Stine Fear Street novel, right? Only like elevated. But it gave me those vibes where like there was something strange about Carrie. Um but the way that it unfolded was really subtle, but we got to see the other people involved and they became a lot more human. I don't remember it being that way in the film, but I really loved hearing a different side of the story when it came to that point, or like the way that things kind of fell into place and how she got to prom and then all the shenanigans that happened afterwards. But like I enjoyed the book. And I'm always surprised by this, and I don't know why. I always like the book better. Well, 98% of the cases I always like the book better. There's been a few where I'm just like, this book was trash. Um, but I really love the film. And in the same way that, well, I don't know, Carrie followed, the movies of Carrie followed closer to the books than it did with The Shining. But like with The Shining, I loved both because they felt so separate. The Shining is one of my all-time favorites. And so reading Carrie, I was expecting it to kind of be the same, like this is going to go kind of off the rails, but it did follow pretty closely. And I don't know, I really enjoyed the book. 4 stars. Because it was a simple read. It was really good. It didn't go strange like I thought it was going to go, you know? So definitely loved reading a classic Stephen King. The next one, though, was a new novel. And I didn't really know what to expect. I kind of equate this to how I felt reading Nat Cassidy's books. Like, I'm curious to see what else this guy has. And this was Incidents Around the House. This is by Josh Malderman. Mallerman? I hope I'm saying that right. But this book was so good. Again, it made me feel the same way that Nat Cassidy's books feel, which I just got a new recommendation called Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy that I'm dying to read. And then there's one that's coming out this year, I believe, that I want to read. That's been intriguing. I think it's he. I think. I'm really excited. Yeah, I'm really excited to know and read those books because I enjoyed it so much. But I found this to be on that same level, at least this first novel. This is about Bella. She's like 8 years old. I listened to this one, and at first I kind of agree. I've heard some people say, because this has been on their top book list for the year, and I had read it as well, so it was really great hearing other people's opinions. But I did kind of feel the same way. I listened to this book, and at first I was like, because it is told from this 8-year-old little girl's perspective, and so it sounds, or it's portrayed as an 8-year-old girl. And I listened to mine on like really fast speeds, like usually around 2 times the speed. So at first it was kind of jarring, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. But I settled in quite nicely, because the uneasy feeling that comes with this book was just too much to let go of, right? So she's this little girl. She's got her mom, her dad, that she calls Daddo, which is so freaking cute. Things seem to be going pretty well. But then there's Other Mommy. And Other Mommy likes to ask Bella to come into her heart. And you can't help but feel like there's something sinister about Other Mommy. And as time goes along, Other Mommy seems to get more and more... Is nefarious the right word? I don't know. It's so unsettling in the most... I don't know. It just felt so subtle how this kind of creeped in. But I will say that, like, the ending seemed a little rushed. Like, I could have gone, like... I would have read it longer. I could have gone more, like, just to kind of really flesh out what happens at the end. But it's like, I want to almost call it like an attempted possession. It's creepy. It's really good. I would recommend. I would probably give this one a 3.5 out of 5, because the ending is not super awesome, the way that it felt a little rushed at the end, but hearing and seeing life through this little 8-year-old girl's perspective, and having this lingering Other Mommy in the background that kind of, it's one of those like under the bed, out of the closet kind of vibes, was superb. I really enjoyed this book. So if you like those kind of tales, pick it up. It's a good one. Next is What Lies in the Woods. This is by Kate Alice Marshall. I almost said that backwards. Kate Alice Marshall. This is about Naomi and her friends. So when they were kids, they used to play in the forest, and they would play this like goddess game. And one day, Naomi gets attacked while they're in the woods. And she can't really remember, but as time goes on, they kind of identify this guy who was wanted for all these, like, kind of like a serial killer, these multiple murders. I think it was a few, maybe like 6 or so. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, he was suspected of all these murders, right? And Naomi gets attacked, and they identify this guy. He's the one that did this. You know, time moves forward. But Natalie gets older, and do I have anything? I don't really remember how this kind of comes up again. I don't know if maybe she goes back home, or maybe a friend reaches out, or whatever. But I know that she meets this guy who's a podcaster, if I'm not mistaken, and he wants to talk to her about this, and like, it kind of stirs up all the stuff. And she kind of has to admit to herself and you know, kind of to others, that maybe she doesn't remember, right? And everything fit, so there was no real big question, but there was still something that just didn't sit right. So it's kind of like a look back on what really happened, and kind of uncovering those memories. I feel like that was kind of a theme throughout the year in the books that I read, like people just trying to uncover what really happened. Like memories are lost, or things have gotten a little shady and they have to figure out what happens, and this is one of those books. It was really good. I want to say I listened to this one and it was pretty quick. I might have listened to this in one day, maybe two. Um, so when I consume it that quickly, it's obviously a really good story. It's a really good pace. It's a really good mystery. I really liked how the characters unfolded and how we figure out what happened, because like normally it's just like, oh, this is what happened, this is who it was, oh, shocker. But like the way that this one unfolded was kind of like, I don't know, it had some like Goonies vibes, right? Like, I don't know, I really liked how this one was written and how things came to be. And so I would probably give it a 3.5. Because it was a really good read. It really was. And up next is Unlocking the Tarot. This is by our own sweet Lisa Pepez. I mean, 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10. I read this book really quickly as well. I got a galley copy before I got um, my real copy, my finished copy, and I tore through it. I loved the way that Lisa set this book up. It's definitely a book that I would recommend to new tarot readers, because the way that Lisa goes through breaking down each and every card in a keyword aspect. It was just really great to listen to how she spoke about the tarot, about the associations that she has with the tarot, and then playing along, because that's the whole thing with this book, is that you can play along, and I definitely did. I grabbed a tarot deck and I wrote my keywords on there, and not only did I base it on some of the things that she wrote and she described, but also my own, not only for new readers but experienced readers, my own knowledge of the tarot and the tarot that I chose to follow along with also really played a huge part in the keywords that I chose for that particular deck. And just kind of going through it in that way really made tarot exciting, like again and again and again. It's like we always find different ways to study and expand upon the tarot, and this was no exception. She's my friend, but I also loved this book regardless. So, Unlocking the Tarot, 5-star tarot book for me. Oh, okay, so the next few, I have to thank Krista at Krista Chronicles for this. These are the first 3 books in the Shady Hollow series by Juno Black. So the first one is called Shady Hollow. Not something that I normally read. I did read another cozy. Was it a mystery? I guess it was. Just a cozy book. Oh my god. I want to say Pet Knobs and Broomsticks. That's not it. What was it called? It's the monster one. Legends and Lattes. Legends and Lattes. Well, that one was so cozy and so sweet. This little series has just stolen my heart completely. So, in the first book, Shady Hollow, we meet Vera Vixen, of course, who's a fox. But she is a spunky reporter and kind of like I call her like a little amateur detective, although she's really good. In this book, we meet kind of the town of Shady Hollow. We have the Bears, who are the chief and deputy. We have the bookstore owner, which is Vixen's BFF, Lenore, the Crow. Nevermore Books, because we all love a Poe reference. There are all kinds of wonderful little creatures in this beautiful little town. We have Joe's coffee shop. He's a moose, has like the best coffee, the best little treats. It's such a sweet setting, but then there's a murder. So I'm in, right? This is a cozy murder mystery series, and so it was just such a delight. In this one, we have a predominant member of society, a wealthy beaver who is murdered. And this is basically a murder that shakes up the whole town that's not used to murders. There's nothing that usually happens much in this town. So when this happens, it kind of sends everybody in this tailspin. And so Vera is basically on the case, and she works for this skunk who's a heavy smoker, which is just so funny because like she goes into his office and it's like, ugh. And it's like, it's just funny. It's funny. It's clever. It's super sweet, but there is a great story to it. Like, it really had me hooked. I'm literally reading the 5th book right now. And just enjoying the hell out of this little series. So we have a dead beaver in the first one. In the second one, which is Cold Clay, we actually get to follow Joe around a bit. This is not, I mean, it is a murder mystery, but this is not a somebody finds a dead body. This is somebody finds some old bones in the apple orchard. And this kind of confronts Joe's story. His wife is gone. It's just Joe and his son. And when these bones are found, it kind of digs up the past. And we have some new people that come into town that kind of shakes things up a bit. And so in this one, we kind of follow that storyline. And in the third one, which is called Mirror Lake, things kind of get heated up in the town because the chief of police is just useless. He's useless. But his deputy, who's kind of interesting to Vera, decides that he's done with the BS and he wants to be chief. And so there becomes this kind of rivalry going on in the town. And in the midst of this, oh, is she a mouse? Her name is like Dorothy or Dolores or something. But there is just a wild cry because she's like, my husband was killed, he's dead, something's gone wrong. But he's standing right next to her, quite alive. So this mystery starts off in a wild way. And so we're following like the politics of the town now, but also this mystery and wondering why this little mouse is hell-bent that on saying that her very much alive husband is dead. So again, these are cozy, I want to say like low stakes kind of mysteries that you can just settle into, and just the town itself, like I want to walk through it. I want to see it. It's so vibrant in that way. I feel like I know these characters. I can see them, you know, the crows and the otters and the bears and the fox and the, oh my god. It's just, I love it. I love it so much. It's such an easy read. It's delightful. So I'm ass deep in in this whole series. I would probably give them, it's not spectacular writing or anything like that. It's just so cozy and fun. I would give these all a 4 because I thoroughly enjoyed them, and it was, I don't know, it was so wonderful to find this little world and to feel like I did as a kid when you find places like the Shire and Hogwarts and, you know, places like that. It's like, this doesn't have as high a stakes as those places. It's just this sweet little cozy animal world. And it's like it's such a refreshing thing to be in it. So, Juno Black, way to go, girl. So I read the first 3 in there. I've already read 2. Well, 1.5 so far this year, and it's the 10th. So I like them. Up next is The Patient. So The Patient is by Jasper DeWitt. So this one is kind of told, I guess it was kind of like a Reddit thread or like a message board thread. And we have this young psychiatrist. Did I write down his name? I didn't. But we have this psychiatrist who goes into this this mental ward, right? And there is this patient who's been there. He's in his 40s. He's been there since he was 6 years old. And people that have worked with him, cared for him, many of them end up unaliving themselves, shall I say? They're driven mad. And so he's kind of been quarantined off. And so this young psychiatrist is just like, you can't do that, right? So he wants a crack at it. Not really supposed to, but kind of does it anyway kind of vibe. And he starts talking to this patient, and, you know, he's like, this is not right. Like, he's undiagnosable. He's incurable. Like, nothing can help. And he's, like, just not convinced of that. And so he gets a story from the patient, and then kind of has to unravel that story with the colleagues and kind of figure out what's going on. And it gets wild. If I remember correctly, this one I listened to in a day because I was, like, in it to win it. I was like, I have to know what happens. Like, it's one of those books, like, you just don't want to put down. Like, I had to know what happens. Period. From what I remember, it's a very abrupt ending, but it had me hooked. Not the best. Would have loved kind of probably a fully fleshed out story, because again, we're like reading it from posts. But it was incredibly intriguing, and I really loved it. And it's funny how these kind of themes, like I tend to have reoccurring themes in what I'm reading. Like, for example, the, you know, memory thing that comes up. I do have another one with like a patient and psychiatrists that are trying to like figure things out, but I tend to go in loops. I tend to go in loops like that sometimes because like I find something that I really, really loved and I'm like, I want to be in that again. So I have a tendency of finding those, but this one kind of happened by accident. I think this one's further down, but anyway, we'll kind of get to that same space again. Next was Moon of the Crusted Snow. This is by, let me see if I can say it. Wageshing Rice? I hope I said that right. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm sure it's going to be here or here somewhere that you can see. So this is about a native town, where a town that the natives were placed in, as we see all the time in IRL, right? And it's winter. And this winter sure does creep up in a wild way. Because not only is it does it create solitude, this whole town kind of gets cut off, but like the electricity is going down, they can't get in touch with anybody. It's very apocalyptic as things start to unfold. And then when outsiders start coming in and telling these stories, there is just an unsettling feeling throughout this whole book. It's like it creeps up on you. Food supplies start to dwindle, right? People start to get really antsy. uh, things start to split off. It gets very uneasy. Now, from what I'm understanding, there's another part to this. I have not read it yet. I don't even know if it's out. I didn't really research it, but when I was pulling the links for this, because I'm put all the links down below for all these books, in case you want to read the synopsis and, listen to stuff that's probably better than me describing this. From what I understand, there's at least a second novel, so I'm really interested in seeing that. Now, I will say it was, I won't say it was riveting. This felt like being caught in there with them, Um, when it comes to native novels, I read Only the Good Indians, I think it was called, which was, that was good. That was good. I think I read that last year or year before last. And so coming into this one, like, I didn't know what to expect, so I was, like, waiting for that, like, creepy otherworldly aspect, and that's not really in there. What's in here is very real shit, right? Like, if you were caught in this winter wasteland, cut off from food, water, electricity, everything, it just puts an unsettling thing. People start to get a little crazy. But what I loved the most, and also was very heartbreaking, was the way that they went back to their elders. They started to speak their own language again. They started to do things from their culture again, which was, I loved it. I loved it. It just spoke to my heart in that way. So I would definitely recommend this book. I wouldn't really consider it a thriller or a horror, really. I mean, I guess you could, but that's what it was touted as. But this is more about survival. It was really good. It was really good. I would probably give this one a 3.5. For sure. Up next is I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is by Ian Reid. When I read this, I found out that there was a Netflix show that was being done on it. So I was like, oh, cool. I don't want to give too much away because, like, I feel like the whole point of the book is, like, you gotta unfold it for yourself. But we're kind of going, if I'm not mistaken, it's like a little road trip or something. Another road trip with this girl who is considering breaking up with her boyfriend. Again, I don't want to really give a whole lot away, but I will say this about this book. I read it, and I've read other Ian Reid books before. I read We Spread a year ago, maybe. And it's kind of the same vibe. Like, there's just a lot of, like, open-ended things, a lot of questions. Like, when I was done reading it, I literally went and looked up a bunch of videos and, like, tried to figure out where I wanted to set my mind in this. Like, did I understand this or did I not understand this kind of vibe, right? It was way better than We Spread. But what made it better was after I read it. When I started going through and listening to other people's takes on this and kind of breaking the book down. And then I didn't watch the Netflix show. I don't have Netflix right now. But I did go and watch a bunch of synopsis on the Netflix show, which does kind of separate from the actual narrative. But from what it looks like, I think it'll probably do a really good job of actually expressing what's trying to be expressed in this book. It's very, I think it's called, considered like a psychological thriller. But it does get in your head, and you start to kind of unravel what's really going on, especially towards like mid to end. You're like, wait a second, Mm. This is interesting. So, I don't want to say too much because if you want to read it, I feel like going into too much detail will ruin this for whoever wants to read it. So, read the synopsis on this. If you want spoilers, go look up some of the videos on this. It was a really good book. I would probably give this a 3. Um, it's again, I felt like it wasn't about reading it, it was about where it left you at the end. That's what I'll say here. Next book I read was The Butcher Game. This is by Elena Urquhart. She is the one of the hosts of Morbid podcast that I listen to on and off. This is the second installment of The Butcher Game. This is called this is The Butcher Game. The first one was The Butcher in the Rin. So this is the second one. We're still following serial killer Jeremy Rose, and the medical examiner Wren is still in it. They are trying to find this guy. He starts up again. He has skipped town, and it is just another kind of cat and mouse game. The same as the first. It gets deeper and deeper. All I gotta say is there better be another one, because the way that this ended, it makes me want more. It is set in New Orleans, kind of back and forth, because our serial killer has left the city. It's just as good as the first one. It's just as good as the first one. We're still trying to figure out Ren's past. We get a lot more information in this one because maybe I won't say that because it might give some of it away, but like she was someone completely different beforehand. I'll just say it that way. Maybe like completely different. She went through some stuff and she is now on the other side, but all these things are being dredged up and we get to learn a little bit more about that, and we get to see the serial killer back on the loose and getting up to shenanigans again. A really good book in general, a good read, a fun read. Probably about a 3. I would say a 3. But I enjoy it. I've listened to the Morbid Girls for years now, and so I really like to support them in that way, and I think that Elena is a really good writer, and I'm really hoping that this continues on because I'm so intrigued. I really want to know all the ins and outs. I want to know everything, right? So it does put that, and you could tell that not only her knowledge as, you know, being a medical examiner, but also being a true crime podcaster. She knows how to tell this story and do it well. And so you can tell these influences kind of come out in the way that she writes. So this was just a really good book, second in the series. Hopefully next year we'll have another one. Up next is Stolen Tongues. This is by Felix Blackwell. And we have a character named Felix and his girlfriend Faye, who go to this little like cabin in the woods. So we have the classic little horror setting. And we get some, I don't know, almost like some Skinwalker vibes. This Stolen Tongues, there are these noises that start happening at night in these woods. Faye has this like strange sleeping disorder and seems to be calling out to whatever is out there. We have some spooky stuff that starts to happen. We're consulting with natives in the area, which doesn't go well. I remember it being good. Like, it was pretty good, but it wasn't spectacular. It was a fun little read, but like nothing too like awe-inspiring. It wasn't super scary. It wasn't something that stayed with you, because I literally, like, I know the gist of it, but I can't remember the nitty-gritty. Just It wasn't something that stuck. It was fun in the moment. Um, I don't want to say like a throwaway, but kind of. You know, like, oh, this was a fun read. On to something new. But that's kind of what it was for me. Um, Probably about 2 stars. It wasn't terrible. Um, but it wasn't super great. I thought initially that we were looking at like kind of a skinwalker or like Sasquatch kind of idea. Um, it was all right. Okay, so then we had Hollow Places. This is by T. Kingfisher. I love T. King. Oh, I just knocked over a whole bunch of stuff on my floor. I love T. Kingfisher. This was not my favorite novel, though. It was still fun. Let me tell you something. The way that T. Kingfisher intertwines her humor, an unsettling vibe, and just like grossness and slight horror, the way that she weaves all this together always makes for a fun read. I've never read one that I didn't like by T. Kingfisher, and I still really liked this book. It just wasn't my favorite, but the concept was so wonderful. So we have, is her name Kara? Kara? Did I write it down? Kara. Kara has all kinds of shit go down in her life, and she kind of needs a place to stay. And her uncle, who owns this like wild, bizarre little like museum, calls her and was like, hey, I mean, I have a place for you to stay, and like I could really use your help in the museum. And so she's like, you know what, I'm going. And like it's so filled, again, it's so, what the, ugh. I thought something touched my foot. It was literally it was my plug from my iPad. Listen, when you out in the country and something touches your foot, I don't care if you're inside or outside, you gotta be wary. Okay, so this museum is full of just the most random, wacky stuff. Like, he's got a Fiji mermaid, and she talks about how like there's all kinds of taxidermy, and there's this there are some pieces that are said to be one thing, and she's like, there's a made in China sticker on the back of it. Like, you know, it's so fun. It's like just wild, crazy, bizarre stuff. There's like, I think taxidermy like dancing mice and stuff like that. It's fun and silly. And so her uncle has to go into the hospital for something or another, a little procedure, and her friend who runs the coffee shop next door are in the museum one night, and they come across this hole in the wall. And from there, it leads them to this really strange bunker. And they end up in this space where there are islands as far as the eye can see. Most of them have these willow trees on top. Hard to tell one from the other. All on these, it's like, it's islands. There's water everywhere. There's like, it's strange. Not quite a Narnia. Not quite a, was it in the Magicians? Was it in the Magician series where they found the well? Like the wells that lead to other worlds? It's got those vibes, but like that's not it, right? And so while they're there, her and her friend make their way to this space. They kind of lose track of where they are. And there seems to be something within the willows, which seem to be pretty invasive. not only to their world, but to other worlds. And while they don't technically go to any other worlds, they do have some odd and disgusting encounters while they're there. I'm not gonna say the one, but if you've read it or if you read it, you'll know why I'm making that face. There's just one part I was just like, oh god. But again, it's T. Kingfisher, so it's lined with this humor and this whimsy. Like I said, it wasn't the best, but it was really good. I read and listened to this book. I did both. I have it on my Kindle. Um, and I enjoyed it both ways. It was still absolutely enjoyable, even though her other ones are still my, you know, higher on my list. This is still one that I'm so glad that I read and that I wouldn't miss. I would definitely give this one a solid 3. Again, Hollow Places. Next, here's my other psychiatrist one. This is called After Oz. I mentioned it. It might have been on Glittering Gators too, as a passing by, or I don't remember. But this is After Oz by Gordon McAlpine, and this follows Dorothy when she gets back from Oz. However, this doesn't go anywhere that I thought it was going to go. This is about the Gale farm and small town gossip and politics and secrets. And when Dorothy gets back, there's been an actual murder. And here's this little girl spouting all this nonsense about killing a witch with water. And the town spinster, after this tornado, has been found dead, covered in acid. So Dorothy, 8 years old, isn't she 8? I think she's 8. Gets put in the Topeka Mental Institution. And Dr. Evelyn comes in and starts talking with Dorothy. And there appears to be a story that starts to unravel. And this is more about small town happenings and coverings up and gossip and strange things that become uncovered while Dorothy is in this institution, and people start looking into this death and the life of this person. And so this was a very interesting read. It was totally unexpected. I came upon it. I didn't even read the synopsis. I just saw like it was After Oz, and that was like when Dorothy gets back and there was a murder, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna read it. And I'm really glad that I stumbled upon this book because it was so good. It was totally unexpected. I love a good retelling. The Wicked series is one of my favorites, like not the movie or the play. The actual Wicked books. I've read a few of them. I don't think I've read them all. I think there's probably one that I haven't read in the series. I read Wicked and Son of a Witch and A Lion Amongst Men. I think there's one more still, or maybe I didn't finish reading A Lion Amongst Men. I don't know. But anyway, those are really great books. I love a good retelling. I love books like Christina Henry, I believe is her name, that does like Alice and like the Red Queen. She did Lost Boy, which was a retelling of Peter Pan, and my favorite retelling of Peter Pan by far. Loved that book so hard. So I'm always about like a creepier telling, or an off pace retelling of a story, or the before, the after kind of thing. This one was no exception. I would definitely give this one 3.5. This was a good read. I really liked it. Almost done, you guys. Just 3 more. So, next one is called No One Can Know. This is another one by Kate Alice Marshall. That was the same one, What Lies in the Woods. So, I revisited because it was so enjoyable. This one is called No One Can Know. And so, in this one, we have 3 sisters. Emma is pregnant. Her husband's he's a bit of a fuck up. Not a huge fan of her husband, but whatever. But she's pregnant, and things are kind of going sideways, and she needs a place to stay. She hasn't really talked to her sisters in years, and so she kind of reaches out and was like, hey, I need to go and stay in the house. This is their house. They've owned this house. Nobody's ever really went back because their parents got murdered in that house when they were young. And rumors, again, we're in small town kind of vibes. Rumors abound. They think Emma killed them. And she's like, I didn't kill my parents. But there's a lot of questions about what happened that night. But here's the thing. Everybody's got their own story. No one's telling the truth. There are strange things that happened. Things that need to be explained, things that are being covered up. We're trying to figure out we're trying to figure out who killed their parents and also what everybody else was doing versus what they said they were doing. And so this is a lot about uncovering the truth, and figuring out where things went wrong, who did what really happened. It was a really good story. I enjoyed how it started to unravel, and we started to find out what Emma actually was up to that night and what her sisters were really up to that night. And this looks really suspicious. And is it her? Is it this one? Is it that? Is it someone completely different? Like, this was a really good book. I would probably give this one 3 stars. It was a great read. And obviously I've read 2 of her books. I think she's an author that I would like to explore more. I usually, when someone's good at a certain type of book, I usually tend to try and read more of their books to see if I'm still enjoying that, because they usually have a similar tone. And with her, it was kind of the secrets and lies. And I think that she does secrets and lies quite well. And so I've been really enjoying those books. My next one is a simple one. I usually reread something every year. And this year was no exception. I reread A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And every time I read it, I have this really pretty little Barnes and Noble's like special edition that has like a leather cover and like printing on the front. I should have brought it, but I don't have it with me. The one that I'm going to show is similar, but mine's prettier. It's like lined in like holly. It's so cute. Anyway, I reread A Christmas Carol again this year, and it never lets me down. The poetic and romanticized way that A Christmas Carol is written just brings me the most joy. The first page is always my favorite to read, you know. Marley was dead to begin with. Dead as a doornail, right? Just the use of language and the poetic style. It's just a delight to read. And it's even better if you read it out loud. While I didn't read the whole thing out loud, although one day I just might, just for my own sake, I was sitting there and I was like, God, I just love this. And my husband was like, what are you reading? I was like, oh, I'm rereading A Christmas Carol again. And he was like, have you not read it before? I'm like, yeah, I have, but like, just listen to this. And like, I read a passage out loud, and I was like, how beautiful is that? Like, these words put together, they fit in your mouth. You know what I mean? Like, they fit in your mouth so well. To speak them out loud is to make them perfect, right? It's not about being on the page, it's how they're said out loud that's just so, it's so good. It's so good. And I think that's just my little drama nerd coming out, you know? I used to do a lot of prose and poetry, um, along with like all my monologues and stuff like that. But like prose poetry was always so much fun for me because some books are just made to be read aloud. And that one, the language is so beautiful and it's so, I don't know. I mean, it's a classic for a reason, right? But man, gotta read that one out loud. I want to say I listened to an audiobook of it once. I might have to revisit that next year and listen to it, maybe being read out loud by someone really good. You know what I mean? Like someone who's got the voice for it, who's got the cadence. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's A Christmas Carol. If you don't know it, I'm sure you're under a rock. No, I'm just picking. But it's a good story. It's a good read, and I love to reread it. It just makes me feel good. I like it. Anyway, last one is called His Black Tongue. This is by Mitchell Luthi. So this has a few stories. It's also got, let me see what it's called, Necropolis and the Blessed Tomb. Meh. Those two little short stories, meh, they were alright. But the first one, His Black Tongue, hell yeah. See, when I got it on my Kindle, and I didn't realize that it was like a few different tales. Like when I turned the page, the next time I was like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh, okay, I know where we're at now. But it was literally called His Black Tongue, a Medieval Horror. So I was like, oh, hells yeah, I'm in it. So this is like plague times, right? We're following a friar and his little ward who seems to be this little saint, right? Or like what they believe is like a little saint, and they go into this village. There's been a lot of sickness, so they're kind of let in. And there is this darkness kind of plaguing the city. And I don't want to give too much away. If you can get this book, even if it's just to read this first story, it was so good. Like I want a full story about this. Like it was so fun because it's got that, I mean, it's got that plague vibe, right? Where you feel the setting, and that alone has a lot of like it sets the atmosphere for that kind of religious zealot thing. But the way that it unfolds is also like you're not quite sure, or you think you're sure, but it's got them twists and turns. All in all, I'm really glad that I bought this book. I think I literally bought it for 99 cents if I'm not mistaken. Maybe $1. Like it was so, I would pay more for it just for this first story. And I'm so glad that I'm able to go back. Like I want to go back and reread just that first story again because I loved it so much. I just like the whole setting. It kind of gave me, like, obviously we're in a totally different time and space, but the atmosphere, if you've ever seen The Witch, that horror movie with the Puritans and the goat, it just gives you those kind of vibes, you know what I mean? It was so good. But the other ones were like, meh. The other one, the Necropolis, is like set in space. And it's literally like I guess like a spaceship for the dead. Like a tomb kind of thing. Am I thinking of the right one? The other two were quite, they weren't very memorable. The Blessed Tomb, maybe the Blessed Tomb. One was like in space. And the other one wasn't too far off of that. I mean, they were nice little horror. Just like basic, I wouldn't really even call them all that gory, just like little horror tales. But they did not touch his Black Tongue. That one was so good. I loved it. And I'm not going to give away any more of it because it was a short read and it was so much fun. You got to read it for yourself. But we in plague times, and it's so good. So because of a book as a whole, I would probably only give this a 2. But that short story itself, I would definitely give a 4 because I enjoyed the hell out of it. So anyway, those are the last 20 books that I read in 2024. Like I said, if you guys have any suggestions, anything that you think I would love to read, please put it in the comments below. I love to hear what you guys think, and your suggestions, because so many of you are so on point with like, Dani, you would love this. And I do. So yeah, drop those in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of these. Which ones did you read? Do you have any favorites? Do you completely agree? Do you completely disagree with what I said? I love to open these discussions, and I watch a lot of book talk just to see what people are saying about certain books. Like, I'll go to certain genres and watch that, and I've just been loving watching all the 2024 favorites in all the different genres. And so I said, oh my gosh, I need to do mine before I forget. So here it is. Thank you guys for joining me. And we will be back very soon. I'm sending you all my love. Mwah. Later, Gators.